Maybe it's just that I'm getting older and a little bit wiser, but the more time goes on, the more I appreciate practicality, especially when it comes to the cars that I drive. And that's what's so appealing about this new Mercedes GLB class, which packs an awful lot of usable space inside what's a pretty small footprint. It also doesn't hurt that it's affordable enough to appeal to shoppers in both the premium and mainstream segments.
And as much as I agree with Dan about sensible choices, I love an overdose of opulence every once in a while. And if you want something crazy, there's nothing more outrageous than this AMG G-Wagon. Let's go.
Okay, truth be told, I had no idea Jody booked this G-Wagon when I had booked the GLB, but it's kind of poetic in a way, and it really is timely, and it reminds me of that whole how it started versus how it's going meme.
Yeah, and so as far as where it started, this car goes back 30 years. And I know a lot of the technology is new and it's a lot more luxurious than it used to be, but a lot of the stuff in here was the same 30 years ago. And you can tell that this car was built for the military. It is so purpose-built and utilitarian. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. You know, I've always found them to be pretty ridiculous, if I'm honest, but one thing's for sure, I would love to get this out on a trail because it is just so capable right out of the box. Obviously with different tires because these are performance tires, but I mean, this thing has 3 locking differentials. It's like the only vehicle in North America you can buy that has front, rear, and center locking diffs, and you can control them all down here on the console. I love it. And also everything else about it underneath, yeah, it's built for the trail. Forget cruising around Beverly Hills or Vancouver or Toronto. That's not what this is all about, even though that's where most of them are sold. It's also insanely fast and loud.
Yeah, and so this one's the AMG version. So it has that awesome hand-built twin turbo V8. It's one of my favorite engines ever. And it is just incredible how much horsepower we pack in.
It's like 577 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque, which is ridiculous for a vehicle like this, and it'll do the sprint to 100K in like 4.5 seconds.
Which is crazy considering how heavy this car is, but it really needs every single one of those horsepower. And so I can really understand why the G-Wagon is such a dream car for so many people because it is so ridiculous, but it is really not that practical. So listen, it doesn't fit in my parking garage. It doesn't have a proximity key, it sucks on gas, and there's no room inside considering how huge it is.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of headroom in here, but it's pretty narrow. We're sitting pretty close together. The back seat is even worse. And once you have the front seats in a proper position to be comfortable in, you have no legroom in the back. I don't really understand how or why you would buy this unless you own like 4 other vehicles and it doesn't really matter to you. But one thing that does matter, I really think it's time for us to get to that GLB.
Okay.
Okay, right off the top, I will say this much. These two have almost nothing in common besides their badges.
Yeah, and so that really goes back to what you said earlier about how it started versus how it's going. So different.
It's pretty wild to me, and you know, I think there's always going to be a place for legacy models like the G-Wagon and the Mercedes lineup, but really this is kind of the future of the brand. I think this is like the new frontier.
Yeah, and so you can tell that there's a lot of new entry-level models in the Mercedes lineup. So there's this GLB, the CLA, the A-Class, and they're all really entry-level models for those people who want the badge but don't have G-Wagon money.
And I think that's the thing, right? It's like, this is still an aspirational brand for a lot of people, for good reason, but not everyone has the means or the desire to spend the money that it usually takes to get behind the wheel of a Mercedes. So if you want to do that still, but you're kind of on the fence about how much it would usually cost to buy something like an ML, well, now you've got a vehicle like this GLB that's going to give you that badge and give you a lot of the same qualities, but for a lot less money. Okay, styling, what are your thoughts on this thing?
Okay, I think my boyfriend actually said it best. He said the GLB looks kind of generic. It could be like a Chevy or something, and I kind of agree with him there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty quirky looking, but I don't necessarily mean that as an insult. I like it personally, but I can understand how it would be off-putting. The nose is really kind of stubby, and the windows are like comically large compared to the rest of the door. Like it's a little bit ridiculous, but I think in the best ways possible. And then when you look at this cabin, it screams Mercedes-Benz, at least in terms of design.
Yeah, so there's obviously a big difference in quality and materials from this and the G-Class, but there's also like $150,000 separating the two. But what I like about the GLB is that in the CLA and the A-Class, it's definitely a bit more down market, and this doesn't feel that bad. I think for the price, you know, it's nice stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know, it's nothing new, right? It's like this sliding scale of materials isn't exclusive to Mercedes. Every brand does it. So if you look at Toyota, the materials in the Corolla aren't quite as nice as they are in the Camry. Those aren't quite as nice as the ones in the Avalon. You know, it goes on and on and on. It's just that I find like in a premium brand, it's more noticeable. The divide between them stands out just a little bit more. And some stuff bugs me in here. So like these fake carbon fiber panels on the door and some of the plastics, but for the most part, I would give this thing credit for feeling the part of a premium vehicle.
So something I really like about the GLB is this screen setup and the fact that it's a touchscreen, which the G-Class doesn't have.
Yeah, now the thing is, it does come standard with 7-inch screens. This has the upgraded 10.25-inch screen, both for the infotainment and the gauge cluster, and they are nice. But one thing I want to say about it, it has these dead zones when you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto hooked up, and that to me is such a bummer, especially because if you look at the Kia Seltos and the Kia Soul, both of those have the same 10.25-inch screen, but it extends to a widescreen format. And I don't know about you, but if I'm buying a Mercedes-Benz and I find out that Kia offers something that I can't get in my Mercedes, I'm probably gonna be pretty upset.
You know what else the Kia has that this car doesn't?
What?
A scroll button for tuning your radio.
Oh my God, I don't understand what happened there. Who at Mercedes decided, let's get rid of the tune button on the console as well as the steering wheel and give you either this button on the touchpad here or this one here on the steering wheel. It's so frustrating to me when I want to skip music and I can't do it. I have to have the music pulled up on the screen, which means I can't have my map. So if we're out here, I don't know where we are right now. I got to navigate away from the map just to switch songs. So brutal. Something else to point out, since we're already talking about the buttons in here, you get old school switchgear for the HVAC controls, which I absolutely love, but then it's this weird mashup of old and new for the brand, and I don't really understand how that works, because if you're used to stuff like this, but then you also have to adjust to these more modern controls, I think that's pretty frustrating. The other thing that's kind of frustrating, you get heated seats up front, but no ventilated seats. If you want those, you got to pay like $1,200 more, which is a lot of money for ventilated seats.
Yeah, and I'm really conflicted about the GLB's features because I find a lot of it's really gimmicky. So, you know, there has a really good voice recognition system, it has ambient lighting, and the seats slide back and forth, which is great, but I feel like a lot of these features are just things that people use to show off to their friends, and they're not super useful.
Yeah, I'd agree, but at the same time, if you're buying a premium vehicle, I do think that's what it's all about. It's not always about practicality, it is about having some flash and something to help it stand out, and that's one area that it's not quite so practical, but it doesn't bother me. I really think one of the best things the GLB has going for it is just how versatile it is. But when you look at the overall footprint, it's only about the size of a Honda CR-V.
And that is true, although the room behind the second row isn't as huge as the CR-V, but you'll still be able to fit a family of 4 and all their cottage stuff in the back, no problem. That second row also splits in a 40-20-40 pattern, so you can still fit longer items in the middle and still have room for 4 people. And one of the best things about the GLB is that you can get it with the third row.
Now, like I said, the overall footprint isn't that big and it looks pretty small from the outside, but it's awesome that there is that third row of seats if you need it. And for the $1,300 it costs, I say it's a no-brainer. No, this isn't gonna work for a family that actually needs a proper 3-row SUV, but it's great that you can flip those seats up when you need them and stick the kids back there so the in-laws can sit in the second row and use that extra room.
Can I drive now?
Yeah, okay.
All right. So Dan, what's the powertrain we have here?
We've got a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that makes 221 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, and that goes to all 4 wheels through an 8-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission.
Okay, and because this is a Benz, it does run on premium fuel, so that's something that you should remember. Between the two of us, we're getting about 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers, which is pretty good, and about half of what the G-Wagon gets. And it's running on half the cylinders as the G-Wagon, so no, it's not as fast and as grumbly, but like I definitely feel like it has enough passing power. Getting up to highway speeds feels good, gives me confidence. I like it.
Yeah, it doesn't sound so great. Even we've got this package, the night package and the sport package both have this artificial engine noise that gets pumped in through the speakers. I still don't like it, doesn't do anything for me, but it feels good, and that's the important thing when it comes to this powertrain. The other thing is, I actually do really like this transmission, and I find it knows which gear it needs to be in. So if you get on that throttle pedal when you go to pass someone, it'll drop down a couple gears before you even have to think about it, which is exactly what it needs to be doing. Now, what about the ride quality? Is it Mercedes enough for you?
So it's okay. I thought it was going to be a little bit softer because that's the way Benzes usually are. They're a bit more cushy, but I like it.
Yeah, these 19-inch wheels don't help. Low profile tires definitely make cracks in the road stand out a little bit more, but I don't find it too bad, though I will say, and this might surprise you a little bit, the one vehicle I'd still be hung up on if I were shopping in this segment is the GMC Acadia Denali with its magnetic ride control. It's so good, and it puts this thing to shame when it comes to ride quality.
Yeah, so the GLB starts at around 44 grand. Once you get all the options that you want, like the third row and all that stuff, you're gonna push it up into the 55 grand range, which is right around that GMC.
Yeah, that is tough because that's definitely in that same ballpark. If you look at the Lexus RXL, which is another vehicle in this range with 3 rows of seats, it's about the same. Both of those are a little bit bigger, but on the other hand, if you're looking to put a proper premium vehicle in your driveway, I'd say this is a pretty good place to start.
To recap, we like the versatility of the GLB class, as well as the efficient powertrain and some of the flashy gimmicks you can get with it.
We don't like some of the materials inside, the shrunken Apple CarPlay and Android Auto format, or the lack of a physical tune control.
The G-Wagon is such an iconic vehicle. It has so much presence and a huge price tag to match. It's just so magical. It has so much personality, but it's honestly not the most practical SUV out there.
I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but this GLB doesn't bring any of that magic to the table. I do think it has its own kind of presence though, and it puts practicality above everything else. If you're shopping for a 3-row SUV, but you actually don't need 3 rows of seats all the time, I think it's a pretty awesome option that strikes a balance between mainstream and premium, all at a pretty reasonable price.